Um, Perfect. Well, good morning, everybody. So today we wanted to talk about, we actually got this requested a couple times about putting together buyer and seller estimated costs or net sheets, whatever you decide to call them. But people wanted some guidance on what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there, how all of those things work, when they should put them together. So we were just going to do a quick training on all of that. Does anybody have any burning questions right away that they would like to get answered today? Nobody? No? Okay, how about this? How many of you guys do net sheets for your clients? Ashley says yes. Good. Jay says yes. Regina? Do you guys use your own net sheet that you've put together, or do you use the one on Northstar? Do you use Remy? What do you guys use?
For sellers, I use the estimated net proceeds.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, me
On,
too.
yep. And that's the one on Northstar?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, Northstar's got a really decent calculator, and we'll show that sometime today. Um, Here's the biggest thing. Not all agents do net sheets. And I find that incredibly annoying because how is a client supposed to accurately make a decision without having the numbers in front of them? Now, there are some times where we don't have the numbers. When a bank is involved and there's a lender that has all of their fees, we don't have those numbers, but the lender's required to give their own closing disclosure. But our biggest piece is sellers and cash buyers, right? What what do they need? And we can, at the very least, give them an estimated idea of what's needed. When you guys do your net sheets, for those of you that do, um, when do you do it? Do you do it right away at the beginning as part of your CMA? Do you do it when you're listing the property? Do you do it only when a purchase agreement is there?
I do it right away, but I kind of like Vern's advice of doing it when you have the purchase agreement because there's so many variables. I mean, yeah, you can predict maybe what the price will be, but you really don't know until the offer comes in. So I think I'm going to do Vern's way from now
Hmm.
on.
That's how I do it too. Purchase agreement in hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that just gives real numbers, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yep. Because there's a lot of pieces. It's not just the purchase price, right? There's a lot of
Right.
pieces in the offer that can change those net sheets. Hmm.
Mhm.
What I've done
Um,
in the past is just use a spreadsheet and
hmm.
at the purchase agreement time, just drop in the numbers, into the different categories
Hmm.
and then present the final to the seller.
Yep. Perfect. Give them different options.
Mhm.
I like to do it when I was negotiating, right? Particularly for my sellers. Like we can counter back at this price here, but this only gives us, another $1,000 at the end of the day. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to go back and forth as a seller, right? It really does help set those realistic expectations with the seller because they have solid numbers on paper that they can see. Now, when I say solid numbers, these are estimated. The title company gives the actual numbers on the HUD, right? Um, I'm glad I put this. So these numbers are estimated. How many of you let your sellers know that very specifically when you're talking to
Yeah.
them about net sheets? These are estimated. These are
Yeah, and
not
I
actual
love
numbers.
Katie,
Yeah.
and I like the fact that on the North Star MLS or MLS, that net sheet is boldly highlighted in yellow. Estimated sellers proceed. Estimated.
It is incredibly important. And here's the other thing that I did when I put estimated stuff, or net sheets together. I always went higher.
Hmm.
I always went a little bit, 50, $100 higher on almost every single cost because them, I would rather the actual cost be low at the end of the day And then you look like a hero anyway. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, right?
I
Same
like to bring
idea.
my I like to bring my net sheet when I get the settlement statement and see how close we were because I have my sellers usually initial it and sit
Yep.
down and say, here you go. This is where kind of the net, where we're how close were we?
Hmm. Yeah, I do too. And not, I, that also helps you get your numbers right. If you're way off and the costs are actually much higher, if you actually put them up against the HUD, you can see where you're way off. And then your clients going forward, you have to apologize to your current clients, but then your clients going forward, you can adjust those net sheets as you go. Here's the biggest thing with the seller net sheet. It shows the goal is to show what they're going to walk away with at the end of the day. Sometimes you have a seller's mortgage payoff, sometimes you don't. Um, that's usually the only variable that you don't have access to. But everything else, all of the other costs, you have access to. A buyer's net sheet talks about how much cash the buyer has to bring to closing, which is another reason why we do not do this for buyers who are getting mortgages, who are doing financing of some kind, because there's too many costs within that bank structure for us to accurately give them a good cost. We will be way off. If you have a really good lender, maybe you can do a net sheet with them, but otherwise, I would leave it to them. Have you guys ever had a lender not give a net sheet or a closing disclosure to your buyer?
I had one that absolutely refused to give me the net sheet, and then had my buyer request to have it sent to me, and then the lender ended up making a huge mistake and cost the seller $8,000 assessment that was supposed to be assumed, and they had it as being paid off. So it's always
Yep.
interesting.
Yep. I only had it one time. Lender was very old. He was a mortgage broker, right? So his own shingle. Um, and he refused to give
Mm-hmm.
any kind of closing disclosure to the buyer. Uh, and at that point, I told the buyer, you should probably go somewhere else because that's required by law. They must. So it doesn't happen often, but I've always wondered if anyone else has ran into the same thing. So when and why? Buyer's estimated cost. When do we do that? As soon as you can. You can either do it when you have your initial conversation with your buyer, um, when you have your buyer consultation and you're talking about costs and the money that they're going to need to have in their account, right? Or you can do it with a purchase agreement, or you can do both. The biggest thing is it has to be cash, right? You do it if it's cash, bank will do it if it's financing. Seller, when and why? I always did one at the listing appointment and I gave them multiple options of our list prices, right? Here's our range. Here's what we're going to list at. Here's what I expect offers to come in at. And if I fail at my job, here's 50,000 less, just so you have numbers on paper, right? Um, when offers come in. And then you have to tailor the net sheet to offers. This is wonderful when you have multiple offers. To do a net sheet when you have multiple offers for each one. Yes, it is a little bit of time, but we get paid the big bucks for a reason to make sure that we're putting all of the pieces on paper. The other thing that you can do is do one when you're doing price reductions to show them what their actual costs are going to be by that price reduction. Has anyone ever had a seller be very against price reductions or taking an offer until you actually put the numbers on paper for them? and then they're fine. I had an older guy who called in the first place and said, "Well, commissions are about 15% now, right?" I was like, "Well, I mean, if you want to pay me that, sure, I'll take that." But he really had no idea what the costs were anymore. It had been so long since he had bought or sold a home. He had owned this one particular home for 45 years that he had no idea. And so he was one of those that he would be against me in price changes, against me in accepting an offer or countering because he didn't know what the bottom line was. And he knew he needed to be at a certain amount to be able to get to his next goal, right? And so I did net sheets for him probably once a week. Now, this was in a time where it took months for homes to sell. Okay. So a little different, but I did net sheets for him once a week because he needed to see on paper what his bottom line was going to be. And it really helped that rub that we had going back and forth. Anybody else have a seller or a buyer have an aha moment once you put the numbers on paper? I'm sure you guys have, but you guys are tired.
I'm a little quiet today, Katie. I'm only a half a cup in.
That's fair. I get that. Yep. Mondays are busy and we are getting super busy in the market.
I have a seller right now that, refuses a price drop because they'd like to spend the money on some surgery. And I said, well, there's no way you can have surgery without the house selling that. So
Right. There's no money if you don't
it's
sell it.
like, anyways,
So those are always fun. Have you done a net sheet for them?
oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I used to do the scenarios 1, 2, 3. This is if you get this, but then, like you said, like Vern said, they could be asking for buyers' closing costs. I mean, there's
Mhm.
so many variables. So maybe do it at the
Mhm.
beginning, and then maybe do a firm one when you get an offer. You
Yep.
know,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Depends on the person, just like all of our business. Depends on the person, depends on the situation. Here's the biggest thing. We're going to look over a HUD real quick for a minute. Um, HUDs are required to be given before closing, as you guys all know. Uh, you as the agent, like Terry alluded to, should always look at the HUD and like Jay alluded to, compare it to your cost analysis, your net sheet that you've done for your person. Because just like everybody else, title companies and lenders can make mistakes. It doesn't happen often,
Yes, it does.
right?
It does.
Tom sounds like he has
saying
a
that
story.
is that who's saying that, Jay?
Oh, that was Tom.
Oh,
Tom
Tom. Sorry.
Grassi. Yeah.
Sort of thought I was on
Yes,
mute. Sorry.
I want
Huh?
to hear the story.
Um,
No
oh, he's
comment.
back
Okay.
on mute, right? No comment.
No
So,
comment. I
y-
guess.
so HUDs are important. And so by doing net sheets, you are getting your brain in the right place to be able to look at HUDs and accurately determine if those costs are correct. Now, again, if the buyer's getting financing, um, you're not going to know a lot of those costs, but you can look at whether or not the assessments were prorated correctly based on the purchase agreement. Some title companies miss that piece, right? You can look at whether or not sellers' contributions were added that you had asked for. On the seller side, if you're escrowing money for something, or you gave a credit back to the buyer for something on the home inspection, that should be reflected in the HUD if you haven't done a price change, right? And you should be looking for those things. That is part of our job, reasonable accounting. Okay. Does anyone have a story of when the HUD was significantly off?
How the company forgot commissions.
Oh, just forgot the commissions completely. It's another good reason to look at the HUD because we also like to be paid for our services. Yes. Um,
I've
just
had it
forgot.
where the Yeah, well, she forgot she had the seller side, but the buyer side she did not see in line 406 that it was 3%.
Okay. So my guess is, Jay, that was at the beginning of the changes.
No, that was just recent again.
Oh, okay.
Hmm. Yep.
So another good reason to send our closing worksheet, right? To whether or
It
not your
wasn't,
buyer.
but it was in there. That's the funny part.
Ah, so that one was legitimately just a mistake. Like we've given you all the information. You decided not to look at it. That's fine. hmm Um, okay, let's look at a HUD quick. I'm sure any of you who have bought a home have looked at these HUDs before. Mm. Or closing disclosures, whatever they've decided to name it today. Um, this is what your buyer is going to get when they're getting a mortgage. This is what a mortgage one looks like, right? Shows estimated property taxes, what the projected payments are going to be, what their interest rate is going to be. 3.875% would be fantastic if we could still get that. Um, and your job is to go through these and just make sure that the lender's got everything that you think should be on there, right? There will be the biggest piece that I look at is this cash to close. Then I would always call my buyer and say, hey, just got the HUD, just looked it over. All of the data looks correct. They've got the seller's contributions in there. Um, did you know that in- your appraisal fee was $405, right? All of those things. And by the way, your cash to close is this number on the bottom of the first page. That's the biggest thing that you need to know. I always explain to buyers that they need to bring this in a cashier's check or wire it to the closing company. I can't tell you how
Oh,
many
I can just
people.
bring a personal check.
No personal checks. No cash in a briefcase. Not a thing. Can't do that. That
You need to
will
tell
delay
your
closing.
you need to tell your buyers also to make sure that the check is made out to your buyer or the closing company in case it doesn't close.
Yes, to the closing company. Yep. Not to you. I've had that happen where they made it out to me personally. I was like, no, we need to fix this. I don't get this money from here. But on the HUD, it talks about all of those different mortgage fees, the underwriting fee, the applications fee, um, any points, if they're paying down any points, flood determination, tax status, their lender's policy, title insurance policy, as well as theirs, if they do any recording fees, homeowners insurance, HOA, right? And I know everybody went through this in school in real estate class, and you guys have been in this long enough where I think you have a good idea of what this looks like. To be quite honest, these are not my favorite. Our closing companies that do the side by side look just like an Excel sheet. I like those. I like those better. I think they're much easier to read. hmm Ashley's shaking her head. Yep.
A few mistakes those on those too, you know.
hmm
One
No,
didn't have earnest money recorded. Whoops.
earnest money is a great thing to check. Absolutely. Especially if you've upped the earnest money for some reason, right? You had your initial earnest money and then you've added more earnest money afterwards. Okay. Okay. What else we got? Oh, now we get to go to the actual breakdown of all of the different costs. Um, for a seller side, this is why it's important we do it for a seller side. There is a lot of costs on the seller side. Okay. You've got the real estate commission. Sometimes that's just listing, sometimes that's also the buying side. Usually it's a percentage of the purchase price. You've got your admin fee that you need to disclose. to your clients, right? You have your title work. Now, who pays for the title work depends on the purchase agreement. Can anyone tell me who pays for the title work on a residential purchase agreement?
Buyer,
Buyer. How about on a vacant land?
seller.
Seller. How about on commercial? No. Seller again. Now, did you guys remember that? I know they've talked about it in class, but did you guys remember that who pays for the title work to be done is determined by the purchase agreement that you use? Yeah. Jay's shaking his head. Yep, he's good.
I just learned something. Thank you.
Good. I love it. Um,
So you said
if you,
residential is buyer, right? That's what Jay said.
yep,
Yeah, the only one you have to worry about are commercial and vacant lots.
Thank
yep,
you.
on the seller side. Yep.
Hello.
Um, so I had a wonderful story about that one. Um, I had an agent. I had a vacant land property listed. I had already told my sellers you're going to have to pay for title work, right? Anywhere between $600 and $800, depending on your title company. And so we had an agent put in an offer for their buyer with a residential purchase agreement. So buyer had to pay for the title work. Not my problem. I don't know why they use the residential purchase agreement, right? Save my seller $800. Buyer's agent wasn't happy. I was like, well, use the right form. I can't do anything about that. The next thing that you have is the closing fee and settlement fee, right? Which is your title company's fee. Each one is a little different. It ranges between 250 and 400. Okay. The other thing that you should think about in that area is whether or not they want to do a remote notary closing. That's an extra cost. If they need to wire funds, that's an extra cost. If they need to, oh, what was the other one? I just forgot. If they need any courier fees, that's an extra cost. So when you're doing the closing fees and settlement fees, I always said to be a little high, right? If you know your title company charges 350 for a closing for a settlement fee, I would do 400 or 450 just to put in there those little extra fees that could be a part of the transaction. And again, if at the end of the day, the bottom line to the seller is higher than what your net sheet says, nobody's going to whine about that,
That's dumb.
right? There's also the state deed tax, and this is in Minnesota. $3.30 per thousand is the state deed tax. Now, do you guys understand the $3.30 per thousand of the purchase price? Jay's shaking his head yes. So if your purchase price is $100,000, you would do $3.30 times 100. You drop off, right? Because we have 100,000s, and that would be your transfer tax or your state deed. Yep. And as I was going through the seller cost, the net sheet with the seller, I would say, this is a state deed tax, nothing I can do about it. If you have a problem with it, go talk to your representative. I can do a lot about other things. I can't do anything about the state deed tax. Regina, do you know if there's a state deed tax in Fargo or in North Dakota?
I don't believe there is.
Okay. That would make sense. If you're never sure, go talk to a title company, somebody who's been in business for a while and can walk you through those things, right? Now, mortgage payoff is part of the seller cost breakdown. If you can get that number from the seller, that's great. If you can't, always tell them not only is this an estimated net sheet, but this does not include paying off your mortgage, right? The seller's not willing to give you that number. Fine, that's fine. But let them know that they need to include it when they're making their plans.
Yeah, I had a seller who absolutely refused to give me the mortgage payoff and then refused to
Mhm.
close on it because it was different on the closing sheet at closing time.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
they just get stupid. I mean, it is what it is, but that's a bad thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and sometimes, and here's the piece that that a lot of sellers don't understand is when they go online and they look at their mortgage amount that's there, that's not the payoff amount. The payoff amount is determined by prorations at the day of closing, which is why that payoff amount changes. And so I've had the same thing where we get to closing, sellers like, no, I have it on my app right here. It says I only owe 365, but you're telling me that I have 367 on here. It's usually interest. It's usually accrued interest that hasn't been updated. Okay. But yeah, it can delay closing as you're sitting there with the seller. Real estate taxes are usually prorated. Seller pays from the first of the year to when they close, buyer pays for the rest of it. Depending on the time of year and how close we are to the real estate tax deadlines, will determine whether or not the seller gets a credit for the stuff they've already paid for, or whether or not they'll have to pay the buyer for the remaining taxes, because the buyer will then have to pay it. So the real estate tax proration really, really depends on where you are in the year. If your seller pays the whole taxes in a year, they're going to get a credit, right? And then taxes are prorated by the day. So you take the full tax number, divide it by 365, that's your daily tax. And then you determine how many days in a year. Now, to be quite honest, you guys, I usually estimated this. I was like, oh, we're almost June. We're about halfway through. This is what your taxes will be. Your portion of the taxes will be. You're also going to talk about special assessments. If there's any special assessments on the house. I see I have a wonderful spelling error. Any prorations or payoffs that need to be done. And you might not know those things until you have that purchase agreement, like we talked about before, right? Buyer might not be willing to assume it because they can't get the loan, so seller has to pay it off. Buyer's willing to pay more for the house, but those special assessments have to be paid off. Make sure you get those numbers. Home warranty cost, if it's asked for in the purchase agreement. Did anybody done home warranties? We don't usually do them in Park Rapids. I think we've done two in my lifetime.
I had one, but it was a while ago, but
A while
not very
ago.
common around here either.
Yeah. Jay,
I've
you
done
had,
I've done
Depending
a
on the
couple.
property.
okay. Regina's done a couple
Sometimes
of
if
them.
we have an older property and I know it's gonna be probably targeting that first time home buyer, I might talk to my seller and actually add it as an incentive.
Hmm. Okay. And I've heard of that working. I mean, my mom and my sister both got home warranties when they purchased and they loved it. So, but seller cost, you'll need to put that on there if that's part of the purchase agreement. If there's any seller concessions, the seller is giving any money back to the buyer for closing fees or buyer side commission. Recording fees. Recording fees in Minnesota are $46 per document. What is that document for the seller usually? What do they have to record?
Deed.
The deed? What about a
Transfer of the
mortgage?
deed.
What about a
Oh,
mortgage release?
yep, that too.
What about any trust documents?
If they have a trust or a power of attorney, there's always additional documents.
Hmm.
like an
There's,
affidavit of trust.
I was waiting for you to jump in. You've got more
I'm
knowledge about
sorry.
this stuff.
Yeah, I have lots of stories about all this.
I bet you do. Do you want to share any?
Um, well, I can. The whole proration with the special assessments can get kind of tricky because they're assessed in with the taxes, and if the seller is paying them, you have to subtract that out of the prorations. It's a whole thing, probably a whole nother training. I have before because I worked for a title company for 20 years.
Mhm.
One time, I'm just sharing my own mistakes here. I missed some prior taxes. And
Mhm.
so we went to pay the current taxes. The tax office would not take the payment because there were prior taxes missed. Um, and I had to call my agent and hang my head low and tell them that we had to call their seller and ask for more money.
Mhm.
Um, for the payoffs, you pay interest not only to the day of closing, but you're going to have to pay, the seller has to pay interest until the bank actually receives the payoff. So probably the title company is going to pad that by a couple days in case they have to overnight it or wire it out. They're going to want to pad that with a couple extra days of interest.
Mhm.
That's all I got right now.
Right. Well, you jump in whenever you want. For those of you who don't know, Darcy worked for a title company for years and years. So if you have any questions whatsoever, or you think a title company's screwing up, Darcy's your go-to person for that.
I've seen lots of
Hmm.
deals where the title company collects the well and septic inspection at closing, and then after closing, the well company's sending us a check back saying this has already been paid for. So, like, if your client pays for that before closing, you need to let the title company know that.
Hmm. Yeah, great point. And I will say there are some times where we don't know, right?
Right.
We assume we've talked to the client, we think that we're going to pay this at closing, everything's fine. And then the seller decides to do something different and doesn't let anybody know.
Uh,
Hmm. Which is also why it's important to go over not only your net sheet, but then the HUD with your client.
yes, you guys go over the HUD and watch for those
Hmm.
admin fees. Lots of times the title company forgets that. And as the person here in the company that processes your commissions, I do not enjoy having to take that admin fee out of your commission.
Hmm.
Like that hurts my heart to do that. So please check your HUDs.
Hmm. Um, so a couple other things, miscellaneous fees, any HOA fees, which are usually prorated unless it's agreed to in something different. Septic and well inspection fees. Um, any fees if you, God, I'm gonna forget. What is it when you hold money back?
Escrow.
Escrow.
Thank you. When you do an escrow, there are costs associated with those escrows. Um, so that might be a part of your seller cost breakdown, depending on what purchase agreement or where you are in negotiations. Did anybody have any questions about what should be on the seller cost as you're talking on the seller net sheet?
All I hear is tax, tax, fee, tax, fee, and then I have to go give these second graders a call or a chat about taxes today. I get to take $1 from them out of their $5. And it's
Nice.
just super relatable.
And this one's for the federal government. This one's for the state government. Huh?
Anyways, it's kind of funny
Uh,
that we're having this chat today.
yep. I mean, you're not wrong. That's exactly what all these things are. Now, higher cost, again, super easy. If the bank is going to do it, they will do it. But if it's cash, there there are actually only a few things that the buyer has to pay for. When you do a net sheet for a cash buyer, it's very small. There's not much there. For sure, there's the closing fee. Sometimes there's a recording fee if there's a trust or they've decided they're going to do the deed, right? Title work, if it's a home, You can put title insurance on there. I was always quoted that $3.25 per thousand for title insurance was a good gauge, but call your closing company, the one you use on a regular basis to determine that title insurance. Most of the time, the home inspection, your buyers are not going to put that on the HUD. They'll pay for that out of their pocket. But like I said, when you do your buyer consultation, that should be something that you're talking about as part of your sheet, right? Maybe the buyer is paying for the septic and well inspection. Those taxes being prorated. Maybe the buyer has some of your commission that they have to pay. That should be on there. But truly, the buyer has usually a very small net sheet compared to the seller.
We don't forget admin fees.
Gulp, thank you. I will add that to my slides before I send them out. Yep. See, I forgot the admin fee too. Hmm. Okay, here's the really fun part. It is really cool when you sit down with a seller and you can just write out the costs. Well, I know it's this one, and I know it's this one, and I know it's this one, and here's what it is. It really makes you look kind of cool in the seller's eyes. They're like, oh, they've got a lot of knowledge up there in that brain. Yep, because we're awesome. However, you don't have to do the math by hand. You don't have to do the math yourself. Like everybody said, Northstar has a great calculator that you can use. You can actually have Remy do it for you. Now, I don't fully like their format, but I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But you can, or you can make your own sheet, Google sheet, Excel sheet, whatever, and set it up to look pretty. I'm going to show you before we get into questions, a couple of those things. Let's see. So this one's the buyer's closing costs. How you get here is when you're in Northstar, you go into finance, buyer's closing costs. Also, if you haven't played with these new calculators, which I hadn't yet, they're pretty cool. So that's just a sidebar. But you're going to put in your buyer's information if you want to. You don't have to. Purchase price, down payment, annual property taxes, closing costs, their loan amount, if you know it, again. And then you'll click the little button that says view report. Does anybody have one? Throw out some numbers. What's our down payment? We're gonna do 100%, right? What's our annual property taxes?
2,200.
There you go. Love it. Um, what's our insurance amount?
18.
Perfect. We're gonna pretend this isn't an HOA. We're looking at about 350 for closing. We put down $6,000 in earnest money. We're not asking the seller to pay for anything. Okay. And our closing date, so you put the total annual property taxes in here because the closing date determines the prorations for you. Okay. So we're going to say that we close at the end of the month. You click view report, and this is what it shows up as. Now, this is for the buyer. Gives property, if you would put the property information in there, gives property information, gives the closing costs, gives your monthlies. Okay. Estimated cost to purchase. This is your cash to close. Again, estimated. And look, it says estimated again. Oh, look, it says estimated again. We like that it says estimated. If you make your own, please make sure it says estimated. You can do the same thing with the seller. Again, that finance tab, seller's estimated. Now, what I like about this one is it gives you 3 sale price options. So you can give them line by line each column of what their sales price could be. And I loved this when I was in negotiations. So they could see that the difference between a $5,000 price change or a $5,000 negotiation is actually very small in the overall number. Okay. Dun 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 dun. Now this one doesn't figure out the state deed tax for you, so that's annoying.
North Dakota does not have a state deed tax. It's in their constitution.
Nice. Okay. I think we need to move to North Dakota, everybody.
Eh,
Yeah. Hey, you sell real estate there. You should be like,
I
yes,
I
everyone needs to come. Oh, right? You can put in your commission. Let's do this and um let's do that. Your admin fee, well disclosures, all those good things. But by putting in those three prices, it gives you your three scenarios and then what they're going to walk away with. Super easy to use. Okay. I wanted to show you, this is the one that I had made a while ago, but same concept. Gives you your prices, gives you your options for all the things. The nice thing about this one is that it figures out the state deed tax, the warranty deed stamps on its own. Okay, same thing with buyer. I also like Google Sheets. I don't know if you guys care about this, but I also like Google Sheets because I can make comments on them so that I can remember. And I don't have to go back and look at the purchase agreement to see who pays for the title work. Because if you don't know, that's in the purchase agreement. Do you guys know where it is in the purchase agreement
For what?
for who pays for the title work? Where that language is in case you ever need to go look? No, I'm not seeing any shaking of heads. So I'm going to show you. So on the
Sure, I
commercial
could
purchase,
find it.
I'm sure you could. It's all in this title and examination. Okay, so this is a commercial purchase agreement. Shall or shall at its expense, blah, 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 blah. All the things. That's commercial. So it's a regular purchase agreement, lines 283 to 301. Really, it's 283 to 290. That's the piece that you need to worry about. But what this says is at the beginning, the seller shall deliver anything that the buyer needs. The buyer shall obtain the title services. Okay. Same thing in the vacant land, 269 to 286. Okay. And they're all, and this is the problem. They're not all written the same. So I always have to read. This one is seller shall be responsible for title certs and exam costs. So if you ever need that stuff, that's where it is. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been in the business for however many years, 13 years. I still have to go look at the purchase agreement sometimes because I second guess myself and I forget. Okay, what questions did you guys have, if any? Or did I cover all of the pieces? Yeah, pretty good.
yeah.
How many of you go over the HUD once you get the HUD? How many of you go over them with your seller or your buyer? Don't just send it to them and say, hey, look this over.
Case by case basis.
Case by case. Okay. Darcy says yes. Terry says yes. Regina says yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is always a good idea. I have had sellers and buyers say, no, this is what I hired you for. I trust you. If you have any questions about what fees are on there, because you don't think, then call me. That happens. That's okay too. But it is good practice to always go over it with your client. And I'm sure the title company appreciates it too if you go over it before they're sitting at the table. Okay. Darcy or Brandon, anything I forgot?
You did great.
No? Okay. Hopefully that's helpful as you get into one. If you guys need help, if you haven't done one before and are doing one for the first time, just call. More than happy to help you out and walk you through it. Perfect. Okay. Next week on Wednesday at 9 o'clock is the mastermind. We're going to be talking about social media advertising, particularly about Facebook and running ads in particular. So put that on your schedule. Should be super interesting. And we'll go from there. Okay, now everybody get up and go do jumping jacks or go run around the block for a little bit. Do something. You gotta wake up.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys
Thanks.
later.
Bye.